Hey lovelies, welcome to another video and welcome to Iris's birth story. I know it has been practically 2 months since she was born, but I honestly could not get myself to film this video. It's just, I feel like all the emotions that I felt in those moments kind of come back the more I talk about it, and as much as you should talk about things, it hasn't been too easy, and yeah. Let's get into it, shall we? So taking it from the top, why I went into hospital in the first place. I was getting constant contractions and actually called the hospital at 39 weeks and 2 days, telling them I was getting irregular contractions and when would I come into hospital. They told me to stay at home until they were regular, which didn't make much sense to me because I didn't feel like my contractions were going to get any more regular than they already were. So my contractions came and went, and Wednesday, Thursday they went away completely. Friday I was getting constant contractions the entire day, so this is 39 weeks and 4 days. Constant contractions lasting anywhere from 5 to 20 minutes apart, minute long usually. The intensity varied, so sometimes they were painful, sometimes they weren't, but they were constantly there the entire day. Now, because of the constant contractions, I didn't realize until after Angel went to bed that I hadn't felt baby girl move. So I didn't remember the last time I felt her move during the entire day. And that kind of scared me and freaked me out a bit, especially considering it was practically 11 at night by the time I actually realized it due to the pain I was in. So I tried different things to kind of get her to move, and bless you. So I tried doing different things to get her to move and nothing was really working. So that kind of started getting me thinking I should call the hospital, go in, make sure everything's okay, because my instincts were basically screaming at me that something was wrong. So at around 10 to 12, the decision was actually made for me by my body. I felt a couple of gushes of fluid, and in that moment I thought that my water had broken. So I called the hospital, I called everyone, arranged someone to watch Angel, and we headed to the hospital. I think it was probably around 1 a.m. by the time we finally left the house, and my contractions had picked up immensely since I had the gushing of fluid. So I thought my water had broken, but in hindsight, it was actually my mucus plug. So it was actually a show, as it was called. So I managed to get to the hospital without killing my husband because the contractions were so bad that even when he spoke to me in the car, in his excitement, of course, I couldn't handle it. I did not want anyone talking to me through my contractions. They were getting super strong, super quickly. So everything was happening very, very quickly. We got to the hospital and were taken into a triage room, and we were asked a bunch of questions. I was hooked up to the monitors, and I was also given a little clicker to monitor baby's movements because I did mention that I hadn't felt her move all day. After about, I think it was half an hour, the midwife started looking very, very concerned. She started watching the heart monitor and just was questioning it as far as I could tell. So until she finally told us that she was concerned about the heart rate of baby girl and that she was going to go and ask an OB to have a look as well and just see where we go from there. So OB comes in and explains that the heart rate is quite low, that they will be taking blood samples, etc. from me and admitting me, so they could actually monitor baby girl's heart rate and see how we can make this move a bit faster, because she was concerned about baby's welfare. Now, before I was admitted and taken to the birthing suite, someone had to take blood, and literally I had to have 3 different people come in and try and take blood, because what with my contractions and my veins just being utterly ridiculous and bursting just like nothing, it was super hard to get blood, and they were having a lot of difficulty drawing blood and drawing enough blood, basically. So I had the pain of the contractions, and then I had them like causing me immense pain trying to take blood from my arm. I ended up with quite a bit of bruising, but yeah, it was definitely not fun. It wasn't starting on a really, yeah. So we were moved to the birthing suite at this stage, and the doctor told me that she would be breaking my waters because she needed things to go faster. I agreed clearly because I could feel something was wrong and I just wanted to get her out. That was my only reasoning. I didn't want interventions. That had been my main thing going into the whole process. But knowing that something was wrong and I could feel something was wrong, I was just like, let's do whatever we have to do and get her out. They checked me once I'm in the birthing suite. I was 4 centimeters dilated at that point. So once we were in the birthing suite, the doctor came in to break my waters. That was decided, said and done. And hands down, the most painful experience I have ever had. And I've had a baby. Like, in that moment... Yes, let her sleep, Alabama. The level of pain, I know. The level of pain was so intense. I was holding on to the gas and air for like as though my life depended on it. And I actually started screaming at the doctor to stop. Of course, understandably, she couldn't. That was the whole point. But the pain was just, I never want to do that again, basically. Like, never. It was terrible. So after the water was broken and I felt the first initial gush of fluid, I heard the doctor go, oh my God, meconium. And instantly in my head, I was like, C-section. So meconium is basically when the baby poops in the womb, and naturally that is very, very dangerous if the baby swallows, breathes in the meconium. So automatically I did say to the doctor at that moment, does this mean I'm having a C-section? And I think she wanted to kind of not scare me, I would say. She said to me, not necessarily, you might actually be able to give birth. It depends on how fast you progress. So she left and came back about 15 to 20 minutes later, and I had actually jumped from 2 to 6 centimeters and a little bit more than that actually. So she actually told me that, yes, you are progressing very quickly. My contractions were telling me that anyway. But the heart rate is just going down and I cannot leave her in there any longer, especially considering my waters were tar black. So we decided on a cesarean. And I signed all the paperwork. I had emergency C-sections, like a whole other thing. Like, you have to sign all this paperwork. And they had to give me something to stop the contractions because I was in full-blown active labor. They had to stop the contractions and give me something for my stomach to kind of settle it because I could not remember what I had eaten last. I had no idea at that point. And I was rushed to the surgery. And this was around, I think I went into surgery at 3:30 a.m. So it had been several hours now that I had been in active labor. I have to say the cesarean itself was a pretty positive experience because there was the midwife monitoring the baby, and then everyone else just made everything so lighthearted, making jokes and chatting and explaining everything to me. The anesthesiologist, there were 2 anesthesiologists, so there was a senior and a junior anesthesiologist. The junior anesthesiologist stayed by my side at all times, explaining everything to me. The senior anesthesiologist was actually Greek, so my husband actually had someone to speak to him and explain what was going on and chat with him, and that made everything so much easier and less stressful because he couldn't understand anything up to that point. And I can't even imagine how hard it would be to be going from room to room and doctors coming and going, nurses coming and going, and you don't know what's going on and what's happening with your wife and your child. Like, that, unbelievable. So I was so happy that there was someone who spoke Greek and was able to actually chat with him and explain what was going on. That just helped everything flow nicely. So the process itself was really weird. I got a spinal done, which was really difficult to get done because of my contractions. They hadn't slowed down a lot, but I was getting one every so often. And I happened to get one right before the spinal. And they wanted me to like kind of hunch over, and they had a pillow and someone holding my arms. It's just unbelievable. And they had to first inject a numbing agent and then do the spinal. I have to say, it's a weird sensation, very weird. Yeah, it wasn't half as bad as I had initially thought it would be. I will admit to that. So having to do it because I had no choice, I was glad that it wasn't as bad as I had thought it would be, basically, is what I'm saying. So I got the spinal done and my body slowly started feeling like rubber, basically. So I had the anesthesiologist next to me kind of explain the steps slowly to me just before they happened, which was really, really interesting because he would say, your body's going to start going numb now, they're going to put ice cubes on you and you're going to feel like weird, and they would do that and it would actually be exactly as he described it. Then he tried describing what was going to happen, how I was going to feel when they actually cut open and started the surgery, which they did as he explained to me, which is, again, weird. He described it as someone kind of going through your bag and what it kind of feels like someone's looking for something in your handbag. I described it as rummaging. Like, I felt like someone was just rummaging around in my insides. It was the weirdest sensation because there was no pain, but it was like someone was touching me at the same time. It was so weird. Like, it was inside. Like, yeah, I don't want to get too graphic because I know some people can't handle that. Weird. So the baby came out really, really quickly. I did not expect the baby to be out so quickly, but I think 3:30 we started, 3:45 she was born. So I felt her being pulled out. And from that point on, naturally things started getting a bit crazy because she had breathed in the meconium and she had stopped breathing. Her heart had stopped. She had to be resuscitated a couple of times and she was given oxygen, and they had a team of pediatricians waiting right there in the surgery with us for her. So they jumped on her and they had to suck out the meconium several times. So after she was resuscitated twice, and then they had to suck out the meconium, I would say about 3 times, I think the paper said. And she was all floppy and just not, her tone was just not there. She was very, very practically blue, I would say. She had lost lack of oxygen for quite some time. She was not 100%. The doctor told us that they would take her to the special care nursery because she needed to be monitored, she needed oxygen, and they just needed to make sure that everything was going to be okay. So in that moment, that was what we knew. Her daddy did manage to hold her for 5 minutes. Well, 5 minutes, probably a minute, I would say. He held her, they took some photos of us, and then she was taken away to the special care nursery, which in that moment, again, the number one thing I had wanted was to have that one-on-one time, the skin on skin. I did not get that. I did not get to hold her for the first 24 hours of her life, basically. But let's continue with the story. So as far as the cesarean was concerned, I did have a bleed, which took a little bit of time for them to find and sort out. So I did stay in there for a little bit longer than was expected. They did find it, as far as we could tell at that time, again, and I was sent to post-op, where, again, as soon as I started feeling my toes and wiggling them, I was able to go into a room. So we were taken to our room at about 5:30 a.m. and again, no baby. My baby was in the special care nursery. The pediatrician came in and spoke to us and explained what they were doing. They were giving her antibiotics because of sepsis, and the meconium had started basically doing its thing, and it would not have been a very good story if I had waited, or if my body hadn't reacted basically to getting her out. Her oxygen levels were improving. She was on CPAP, as they called it, which is basically a little oxygen mask that they put for babies. She was in an incubator. She was on antibiotics, fluids. It was, they were going to be keeping her for at least 36 hours at that stage. So I was not going to be able to see her unless I got out of bed. And at this stage, I couldn't move. I couldn't feel my legs yet. So for me, that was just, yeah. So at this stage, a nurse actually came in and directed me, literally directed me, to hand express every 2 hours and send the tiny amounts of colostrum that I would be able to get out to the nursery so that they could give them to baby girl. And since that was the only thing I could do, I religiously hand expressed it every 2 hours. On painkillers and having been sliced in two, basically, I managed to get myself out of bed about, I think, 8 hours after the surgery. I dragged myself out of bed and into the shower. The pain was unbelievable, but I didn't care because the only way I was going to actually see my baby was if I was able to walk. I had to physically walk to the nursery. Now, I will say the first time I went to the nursery, the midwife did bring a wheelchair for me and took me there. but I was only able to stay for like 10 minutes and I wasn't able to hold her, and it was just, yeah. So fast tracking just a little bit, I stayed in hospital for 2 nights, so Saturday and Sunday night, and then Monday I was able to leave the hospital. Baby girl was not able to leave the hospital. Throughout this whole process, Angel was having a very difficult time at home. I had left in the middle of the night, so she hadn't seen me leave. She woke up to me not being there. She went to bed. I wasn't there to put her to bed. The next morning again, I wasn't there. She was struggling, having a very difficult time, because keep in mind, she was always with me up to this point. And if I had to go somewhere, I would explain to her where I was going. I would say goodbye and I would tell her I'd be back, and I would then come back. Whilst now, what are you doing? Whilst this time round, none of that happened. I just vanished into thin air. And I could barely speak to her on video call, on Messenger, because I just kept bawling my eyes out the moment I saw her, because she was so sad. And I was hormonal, and I didn't have either of my babies with me, and I'm already getting emotional. That's lovely. And it was just very, very hard. And due to the whole COVID thing as well, my husband was not able to stay with me overnight, so I was left alone in a hospital room without my babies. And he did call me at, I think it was 5 in the morning on the Sunday, when Angel woke up and I wasn't there again to comfort her, and she was just crying and she wouldn't be comforted. And I was trying to speak to her over the phone and calm her down, but I was also a mess. It was the hardest thing, I think, was the fact that I had gone in to have a baby, and one of my babies was at home, the other was in the special care nursery in an incubator on oxygen, and I just felt so helpless, and I couldn't help them, I couldn't comfort them. So by the Monday, I was able to leave. I was walking, I was going back and forth to the nursery pretty much every couple of hours at this stage. I was pumping, and I was getting the colostrum and getting whatever milk I could and giving to baby girl. Unfortunately, things were not going the way they wanted in regards to her health and what was happening with her, and she had to stay in hospital, but I will be making a separate video on that because there's just too many details to kind of go into right now. It would make this video huge, and it's not part of the birth story, I feel. It's part of her life story after the birth. So as far as my cesarean, it was a good experience, and after that, we did have some complications, but as far as this stage is concerned, we went home. I went home on the Monday, and I pretty much didn't rest at all since I had the cesarean, because I was constantly going back and forth to the hospital as well. I think that probably led to some of the complications I had later on, but again, that will be a whole separate video. I will say I did end up in hospital again 2 weeks after I had given birth, and that's a whole other thing. But all in all, baby Iris's birth was eventful, to say the least, and I feel that the midwives are amazing and the doctors were amazing, and especially those people in the surgery room, everyone, the operating room, anyway, whatever, you know what I mean, the theater. They were all amazing. I honestly think that if I had had different people in there, it would have been a very scary experience. And the pediatricians and everyone who just made me feel okay that she was okay. There were issues that we would have to deal with, but she is okay. She was not in immediate danger once she was in the nursery. But yeah, I'm getting very emotional now, just kind of remembering being alone and an Angel, just very difficult time. So I will leave this video here. You guys can expect a video in regards to why baby girl was in the special care nursery and our stay there. She stayed for a total of 5 days. We came out on the 6th. We had to go back and forth. It was an intense time. And then again, another video in regards to complications on my side as far as my recovery and cesarean and everything was concerned, because I had quite a few complications as well that just, yeah, it was a difficult month, July, I have to say. So yeah. And on a cheery note, I will have a home tour for you guys coming as well. So very quickly before I end the video, baby girl was born weighing 4,350 grams. She was a big baby, a chunky baby. There was a lot of fluid and a lot of other issues in regards to her weight. She was a very heavy baby and actually had a big head. And the midwife actually mentioned that she wasn't sure how I was actually going to give birth to her, if I did give birth to her naturally, because she had quite a big head and I was quite a little person. So that was kind of, I don't know if she was just trying to make it out that, well, you know, it's easier this way. I wouldn't know. But anyway, that's all guys for this video. I will see you in the next one.